As you know, I'm just reading Professor Dev's paper. So let me start with how she has started. I'm deeply indebted to the members of the Executive Committee of the Indian History Congress for electing me to preside over Section 5 Archaeology at its 79th session being held in Savitribai Pune University. As you all know that we couldn't have it in Pune. The recent trend in Paleolithic archaeology concerns systematic study of interrelationships between culture, environment and landscape. To explain human-land relationships during the Paleolithic, it is necessary to understand the physical and biological environments of that period. Thus, paleoenvironmental studies from the basis of prehistoric archaeology form the basis of prehistoric archaeology. Such studies involve applications of various methods and techniques of earth sciences. A new discipline known as geoarchaeology has developed in recent decades, which is primarily concerned with the investigations of landscape contexts where archaeological remains are found. Earth sciences, geomorphology and geology have played a crucial role in the study of Paleolithic archaeology of India. In particular, much of the early research in Paleolithic archaeology in India was carried out by trained geologists such as Foote, 1863, Wine, 1863 as reported in Oldham, 1868, Krishnaswamy, 1938, Dattera and Patterson, 1939, and Zeuner, 1950. The role of geomorphic studies in understanding Paleolithic landscapes and human interactions with them is now taken for granted. Just given a subsection, present environment. Geographically, Maharashtra occupies a vast area in peninsular India. Physiographically, it can be divided into two major zones, namely the upland Maharashtra and the coastal belt known as the Konkan coast, separated by the Western Ghats. Geologically, the major part of Maharashtra is covered by the Deccan Trap basals of Cretaceous Eocene age. Patches of Precambrian rocks are found in some parts of southern Maharashtra, Kolhapur and Ratnagiri districts. These ancient rocks are unconformably covered by lateritic regolith, commonly in Konkan and the crest of Sahyadri mountain range, and in isolated pockets in the rest of Maharashtra. The present distribution of laterite regolith is a result of tectonic movement and climatic changes of the tertiary period. Upland Maharashtra, a part of ancient landmass of peninsular India, consists of erosional rocky upland drained by allochthonous and autochthonous rivers. The region as a whole is tectonically relatively stable. All the rivers of Maharashtra are presently eroding their beds and consequently exposing their older deposits. In the upland part of western Maharashtra, the alluvial deposits of the rivers never exceed 30 meters in thickness or 2 to 3 km in lateral extent. Geomorphologically, the landscape is dominated by pediments with Inselberg, stores and broad box-shaped valleys drained by autochthonous and allochthonous channels with highly seasonal discharge. The present bedrock channels are ungraded with conspicuous nick points almost up to their confluence with trunk streams. Waterfalls, incised meanders, deep coalesced potholes are significant erosional features observed in most of the streams. Regolith cover consists of laterites, vertisols and colluvio-alluvial deposits occurring in foot slopes of medium to low elevated hills and on the banks of bedrock streams. The exposed thickness of colluvio-alluvial deposits rarely exceed 20 meters on both banks of streams, and the lateral extent is 1.5 to 2 km. Most of the present channels are incised into older alluvium. This region gets mainly the summer monsoon rainfall between June and September. Climatically, the region is labeled as semi-arid, with the annual rainfall varying from 400 mm to 1000 mm and is largely covered by dry, deciduous to thorny and scrub forests. In brief, the present landscape is a legacy of the tertiary humid climate and strong tectonic movements, followed by the quaternary climate and sea level changes with moderate tectonics controlled by pre-Deccan Trap structural setting. Against this brief background of the study area, the present paper attempts to understand Pleistocene landscape of Maharashtra, particularly with the western part. It seeks to summarize the current status of knowledge and highlights the work conducted in the past few decades. The beginning. About 150 years ago, an agate flake having every appearance of human workmanship was picked up by Vine in 1863 from the gravels of the river Godavari near Paitan, as reported by Oldham 1868. A large number of mammalian fossil bones were also collected from the alluvial deposits of the river Krishna and the Godavari by geologists and paleontologists like Twemlow, Crook, Pilgrim and others. These fossils mostly belong to species like Elephas namadicus, Bos namadicus, Hippopotamus pleodicus and others. All these studies established the presence of Pleistocene alluvium in the Godavari and other rivers of the region under consideration. Later, Vredenburg studied various river profiles from central India and Maharashtra and showed that a very extensive, though moderate tectonic disturbance had affected the peninsula in Pleistocene period. He suggested that due to gentle warping, rock basins in many rivers were formed and thus providing suitable traps for alluvial deposits which belonged to a single age. This phase was followed by the systematic survey Pleistocene alluvial deposits of the rivers, particularly in the upper Godavari. First discovery of the Acheulean artifact made of basalt existence of early and middle Stone Age in stratigraphic context, that is in Nevasa, interpretation of thick alluvial deposit as aggradation in arid phase and erosion in wet phase. She has given actually phase by phase a report of what was happening. So in post-1960 period, that is 1960 to 1980, the period witnessed widespread investigations of fluvial, lacustral, aeolian, littoral and glacial sediments in the context of Stone Age assemblages in different parts of India. Late 1950s thus witnessed the beginning of field-based studies in various river basins of Maharashtra. Professor Sankalya's observations in Sabarmati Valley emphasized the need for geologically oriented studies of the lower Paleolithic sites. He also suggested that archaeological data, if meticulously collected from the geological deposits, may help scientists to understand past environmental, particularly climate changes in a country like India, where the cost of carrying the sophisticated laboratory analysis is beyond the scope of many researchers. Professor S.N. Rajaguru's pioneering field-based research indicated that there were no drastic climatic changes during the Pleistocene period and rivers were controlled by large-scale tectonic disturbances. Post-1980 period till 2000, the present day 2018. During this phase, greater emphasis was given to the application of laboratory techniques for sediment studies coupled with radiometric dating of quaternary deposits with the help of absolute dates from a few sites. Researchers were able to reconstruct the quaternary history in a secure time frame. This period witnessed a major breakthrough in understanding of quaternary environments as follows. 5 lithoformations were proposed in the major rivers, discovery of volcanic ash at Bori and Morgaon, in association with Acheulean artifacts, provided possibility to procure absolute dates, thereby pushing back the antiquity of the Acheulean to early Pleistocene period. B. Reinvestigations at Gangapur confirmed the Middle Pleistocene age for the Acheulean phase, inferring wet climate phase during the early Pleistocene based on environmental proxies such as presence of ferricrete, laterite and absence of calcrete. Fluvial response to late quaternary climatic change, major excavations of Acheulean sites at Chirkion, Pravara and Morgaon, discovery of number of Acheulean sites in the upper Krishna basin, reinvestigation of Acheulean sites such as Gangapur, Bori and Lakshminala. The Sahyadri formed one of the conspicuous erosional geomorphic features found along the west coast of India. This range divides the lowland Konkan from the upland plateau of western Maharashtra. The magnificent escarpment of Sahyadri forms the eastern border of the Konkan region. The lowland Konkan is a narrow zone with an average width of 40 to 60 km, extending from the coast to the foothills of the Sahyadri range. This lowland has primarily developed due to the backward retreat of the Grand Fault Scarp and due to Cenozoic sea level and tectonic movements. Streams in coastal Maharashtra, Konkan coast originate in high rainfall Sahyadri mountain range and debouch into the Arabian Sea within a short distance of 40 to 60 km from their source. These streams are autochthonous and flow through rocky gorges almost up to their mouths on the Arabian Sea. Littoral deposits are only restricted to the narrow strip of less than 5 km from the present shoreline of the Konkan coast. Konkan coast is a rocky coast with humid tropical climate. The Konkan lowland is mainly covered by Deccan basalts of the Cretaceous-Eocene age and laterites of the mid-Tertiary to the late Tertiary age. This coastline has preserved distinct geomorphic features that reveal signatures of dynamic environmental changes that occurred in the past. The quaternary record from the Konkan coast is sketchy. Todd's early work in west coast of India established cultural stratigraphy of the Pleistocene period. He collected artifacts from Worli and Kandivali near Mumbai. From surface context, he studied Kandivali Nala deposits near Mumbai and reconstructed continuous cultural sequence from stratigraphic sections. He reported that stratigraphically the basal unit comprised bluish clay resting directly on the basalt, and lower Paleolithic artifacts were found on upper surface of this clay that was capped by torrent gravel. After 2 decades, archaeological investigations were resumed by Malik, who reported a hand axe from Nalasopara and Ghorbandar. Following Todd's work, Sankali and Zoiner carried out prehistoric investigations on the west coast of India, particularly around Mumbai and in Saurashtra in 1949. Sangalia unfortunately could not relocate Todd's section but reported Middle and Upper Paleolithic artifacts around Mumbai. This work raised basic questions regarding the sea level and climatic changes and the associated Stone Age cultures in coastal lowlands of arid Saurashtra and humid Konkan during the Pleistocene. A major breakthrough in understanding coastal geoarchaeology of Konkan coast came up when Guzdar initiated her investigations in this area in 1970. She studied a number of alluvial as well as littoral deposits all along the Konkan coast and reported a few Paleolithic sites around Malvan in South Konkan. She carried out a small-scale excavation at Hadi, 12 km north of Malvan on the floodplain of the Gad River, 5 km away from the present coast. Interestingly, the site is situated in a shallow floodplain developed on quartzite bedrock. Lower Middle Paleolithic artifacts made on quartzite were reported from this site. Guzdar also studied the beach dune complex rock, a littoral formation locally known as Karai of Konkan coast, and put forward the chronology of its formation based on 25 absolute dates by C14 method. Further, she reinvestigated the area around Kandivali in 1972 and established clear evidence for Middle Paleolithic occupation in the region. Sir, may I skip some portions for time constraints? So she was giving an overview of the things. So apart from these archaeological studies on the Konkan coast, researchers have carried out detailed studies of rivers of Konkan and made inferences about sea level change. Kale and Rajguru reconstructed the history of sea level changes in late Quaternary and suggested a high sea level during the last interglacial. They further inferred that sea level remained lower than the present one throughout the late Pleistocene. In another study, Kale and Rajguru argued that during the period of low sea level, there was an increase in continentality and aridity, leading to aggradation on the leeward side of the Western Ghats. The high sea level following the arid phases decreased continentality, but led to increased runoff, at which rivers began to cut down the beds. Then the changing concept. So she first gives the chronology. I am not reading the chronology. And I'm going to this section on sea level change. The chronological record of Pleistocene deposits from the Konkan coast is meager. The only available date is from fossil beach rock ridge presently occurring in the intertidal zone at Mahim near Palghar, 90 km north of Mumbai. It indicates emergence of coast during the late Pleistocene, where the sea level in general was low by several meters. So far, not a single stratified Acheulean site of the early Pleistocene age has been reported from the west coast of India. The sea level during major part of the Quaternary remained lower than the present day sea level, and it was lowest during the last glacial maxima. This lowering of sea level had profound impact on the landscape of the Konkan coast. So far, there is no direct evidence for last interglacial sea level on the Konkan coast. However, mid-Holocene sea level was higher by a couple of meters than the present one. Then there are some tables. Finally, remarks. In view of the technical problem involved in applying various absolute dating techniques, Deo and Rajguru have attempted the traditional landscape approach to understand early Pleistocene environment of Acheulean sites in the Deccan upland. They have used geo-environmental factors such as presence of laterite, absence of calcrete, and fluvial deposits such as high-level gravel and aggradation erosion processes of rivers. Based on these geomorphic features, Deo and Rajguru have postulated probable climatic conditions during Quaternary period. The Pleistocene geological investigations in this region have brought out the following significant results. On the whole, the landscape of upland Maharashtra is characterized by long stable environment. It recorded two major catastrophic geomorphic events, namely the Tepra fall and the meteoric impact of the Lonar crater late during the Quaternary period. Aridity increased from the Neogene to late Pleistocene in the Deccan upland. The monsonic rainfall was strong during the Neogene and weak during the late Pleistocene. By and large, the sea level remained low during major part of the Pleistocene and it reached its present position during 6,000 years BP. Geomorphological studies of some of the well-investigated Stone Age sites have established the changes in climate, river courses and sea level during the Quaternary period. Based on geoarchaeological investigations carried out by scholars from the Deccan College, Pune, the character of landscape of Maharashtra in past is as follows. Then she gives detail of the table on the characters. Then what is very important is problems to be solved in future. Our present understanding of geomorphic environment of Paleolithic period is in an embryonic stage. It is therefore suggested that future multidisciplinary studies of Paleolithic sites in Maharashtra would open up a new avenues for understanding the origin and development of Paleolithic cultures in the subcontinent in general and upland Deccan in particular. At present, it is possible to interpret the complex relationship in a tentative manner, as high-resolution data on various paleoclimatic proxies are still awaited. Some of the problems that need attention are Acheulean sites with close association of the Turfra in upland Maharashtra needs further detailed geological and geochronological investigations due to uncertain technical problems persisted in absolute methods of dating used so far. Second, the earlier concept of Nevasian Middle Stone Age has been questioned. This issue requires re-examination at promising sites like Nevasa, Paitan, Hadi and Mumbai. Reinterpretation of paleontological data are needed in view of the revised chronology. Future research should focus on prehistoric cultures in the coastal area with strong emphasis on multidisciplinary studies. Reasons 5. Reasons for aggradational and erosional processes in the upland Maharashtra are not yet fully understood. There is therefore a strong need to link geomorphological studies with biological studies. To conclude, I'd like to quote Guzdar, quote, "If much of the data are negative and the results at times conflicting, this only serves to indicate the magnitude of detailed work ahead before we can adequately interpret the complex relationships among the various environmental factors and between the environment and man." Unquote. Thank you very much.
The known information is the present study area, Kurnool district in Rayalaseema region of Andhra Pradesh, which is the very richest for the prehistoric culture, not only in India, but also in the entire world. So many archaeologists from the various countries focused and conducted several explorations and excavations in this area. So, in this connection, I used to conduct explorations and explored 2 unknown sites and visited one known site. So actually, before going to discuss regarding my explorations, if we come to the Neolithic culture, we know very well the main features of the Neolithic culture. The silent features of Neolithic culture are so domestication of animals and plants, and settled village life, and using of that means pottery production, and at the same time use of the polished stone axes and stone blades. So from the 1844 onwards, that means from the archaeologist, the known archaeologist kept a new bolts times 2 till now, that means till to the current year. So many archaeologists, as I said just now, concentrated in this region because of the richness of this region for the archaeology or prehistory. So come to my explorations in the Kurnool districts. So the villages are namely Nagaruru, this one, and second one is Patapadu, and third one is Pyalakurti. Actually, among these three sites, Nagaruru and Pyalakurti, these both are unknown sites. Patapadu, so it is very famous site. So many archaeologists from all over the world concentrated on this site. We know very well that Michael Petraglio and Ravi Korseta, who has done much more work on this site. So coming to one by one, the first site, Nagaruru. So actually, I don't want to go through all the information mentioned here. So this site is located at the granite foothills, locally called Timmappa Mettalu. So from this site, I have collected so many stone tools which are made of dolerite intrusions and granite. So from this site, actually, if we come to this axis, Neolithic axis, triangular axis of various sizes, measuring 8.2 centimeters to 15.8 centimeters in length, and edges measuring 7 centimeters to 9.5 centimeters. So here, some terracotta beads and stoneware marbles also found. So and at the same time, some of iron slag shows the existence of megalithic culture also in the same site. And this is the red black ware, red and black slipware ceramics found there. So here look very interesting axe cells which have broad butt end measuring 26 to 28 centimeters. So these are all the material made of dolerite intrusions and granite collected by me from this site. So now come to another one, Patapadu. It is a well-known site. So here, when I used to conduct my exploration, I collected only one stone tool, that is called shouldered shelt. Actually, this is made of black stone. Actually, these type of shells must be associated with other objects, which I could not find, unfortunately. And so I am feeling that the field work should be extended, because this is the only stone tool which I have collected from the site. So the third one, Pyalakurti. This is also unknown site. Actually, according to the villagers, long back there was a village in this site area. That village is named, the local people are called that village name as Sudarapadu, but it is a corruption of Surya Boinapadu, because Kamampadi Satyanarayana, one of the famous historians in Andhra Pradesh, he mentioned regarding this village, not this site, regarding this village as Surya Boinapadu. So which is very nearest to the Pyalakurti village. That means with a distance of nearly 800 meters only from this Pyalakurti village. Actually, now itself there is no village. A ruined village is occurring in the name of Sudarapadu locally. So anyhow, in my explorations conducted in this Surya Boinapadu Pyalakurti site, I have collected shell beads in various sizes, shell bangles broken, terracotta beads, stone marbles, steatite beads, and in ceramics, lead and broken hopscotch, drum and tubular drum-shaped red corals, drum-shaped emeralds, but all are plain and not designed. These are the beads which I have collected from the site. So terracotta beads here, terracotta beads and stone marbles, lead and broken, this one lead and broken hopscotch found here. So and here, see here, drum and tubular drum-shaped red corals, and here these are drum-shaped emeralds and steatite beads. So finally, this is complete. Yes, madam. So these are all shell beads and shell bangles, shell beads in various sizes. These are collected. So coming to the conclusion, actually according to Alchin and Alchin, so there are three-phase sub-regional framework regarding the settlement pattern of southern Neolithic people, phase 1, 2 and 3. So regarding to my explored sites, Nagaruru, which belongs to the phase 2, as this site is located very adjacent to the granitoid hills and leveled terraces on hillsides, whereas in the case of Patapadu, belongs to the phase 1, as this site is located very near to the top of granitoid hills. And regarding the Balakurti, it may belongs to the phase 3, as the site located on the plains and wherein lack of granitoid hills or valley floors are observed. So in this case, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, three types of villages were explored by me. And finally, all these three sites are here I tried to mention the ethno-classical perspective. All these three sites are also inhabited to this day, maximum by the pastoral community, that is Golla caste. Most probably, this Golla caste is very dominant one in all aspects, that is socio-economic and politically, even on today, in the study villages, as they have been practicing animal husbandry, besides agriculture. And so on, subsistence pattern, economic life and material culture of the same can be meaningfully applied to reconstruct the early farmers' life, to understand the historical relationship between them as the early farmers practiced agriculture besides animal husbandry. On the basis of these explorations conducted in all these three sites, it is come to know that the archaeological evidences found here shows the cultural continuity. This is my paper, sir. Thank you.
क्योंकि मैं मध्य प्रदेश पे काम कर रहा हूँ, तो मध्य प्रदेश का प्रेजेंटेशन यहाँ होना आवश्यक है, इसलिए मैं यहाँ आया हूँ और इस आधार पे मैंने इस साइट को लिया है। अब इस पुरास्थल की एक स्थिति को हम बताते हुए आगे बढ़ेंगे। मध्य प्रदेश की उत्तरी पार्ट में अशोकनगर डिस्ट्रिक्ट है। ये पहले एक दूसरा डिस्ट्रिक्ट था, 2003 में ये अशोकनगर जिले में बना है, जो बेतवा के लेफ्ट साइड पे, बेतवा के बाएं तरफ है। और यहाँ पे मैं लगभग पिछले 3 सालों से सर्वे का काम कर रहा हूँ। यहाँ पर सर्वे करने से मुझे एक ऐसी साइट मिली जो बहुत बड़ा शेल्टर है वहाँ पर। उस शेल्टर की लेंथ लगभग 40 मीटर के आसपास है। उस साइट को हम देखते हैं, अगर कोट करते हैं मैप में, तो मैप में आपका ये जो राइट साइड है पूरी बेतवा रिवर जा रही है। और बेतवा रिवर में जब हम इसमें सैटेलाइट मैप से देखते हैं तो पूरा जो रेड सर्कल किया गया है वो पूरे शेल्टर्स हैं। उन शेल्टर्स को वहाँ के जो स्थानीय लोग हैं उसे वो सिद्धन की पहाड़ी मानते हैं और वहाँ पर बहुत सारी गुफाएं हैं। उन गुफाओं में से एक जनरल व्यू आप साइड का देख लीजिए, साइड जो हमारी है उसका जनरल व्यू है, ये है वो केव। उस गुफा का अगर लेंथ देखें लगभग 40 मीटर उसकी लंबाई है, 8 मीटर की डेप्थ है उसकी, और उसके साथ साथ अगर हम उसकी ऊंचाई देखें तो 15 फीट से ज़्यादा की ऊंचाई है उसकी। मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट ये है कि इसके पास जो फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट ने एक गड्ढा खोद रखा है 100 मीटर का। उस 100 मीटर के गड्ढे में जब मैं विजिट किया तो वहाँ पर लगभग 2.5 से 3 फीट का हमें कल्चरल डिपॉजिट मिला, पूरा स्टोन सीक्वेंस का डिपॉजिट मिला। वो स्टोन जो डिपॉजिट उसको कलेक्ट किया, उसकी स्टडी की, तो सबसे ज़्यादा हमें कोर मिले। कोर जो क्वार्ट्ज के थे, अगेट के थे, इस तरह से, और चालसेडोनियन भी कुछ मिले हैं। इनका ये सेक्शंस हैं। यहाँ से ये टूल्स मिले हुए हैं। इन टूल्स को जब हमने देखा तो इन टूल्स में एक हमें जो आपको दिखेगा 15 नंबर पे ये थंबनेल है, लेकिन थंबनेल को इसको पॉलिश किया गया, बकायदा फाइन जो न्यूलिथिक फेज में जो पॉलिशिंग टेक्निक यूज की जाती थी थंबनेल पे वो बिल्कुल पॉलिशिंग टेक्निक यूज की गई है। इसके अलावा कोर्स बहुत सारे ब्लेड्स पे बने हुए फ्लैकिंग टूल्स बहुत सारे हैं। इसके अतिरिक्त यहाँ पर 2 शेल्टर ऐसे हैं जिनमें रॉक पेंटिंग्स हैं। शेल्टर नंबर 2, अब शेल्टर नंबर 2 में एक आप देखेंगे राइट साइड पे कुछ ह्यूमन चेन बनी, जो मानव की चिन्ह बने हुए राइट साइड पे एक लाइन से खींच के बनाई गई है रेड कलर के, और एक बड़ा सा वृषभ बना हुआ है जो बहुत ज्यादा वेदर्ड हो चुका है प्राकृतिक कारणों से। इसमें शेल्टर नंबर 2 है ये, सॉरी शेल्टर नंबर 3 है। शेल्टर नंबर 3 की जो हाइट है ये जमीन से लगभग 20 फुट ऊपर है। तो वहां पर भी बहुत सारी पेंटिंग्स आप देख सकते हैं, राइट से में थोड़े छोटी छोटी सी चीज लाइन दिख रही हैं। अब ये वहां पर 2 मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट पेंटिंग्स है जिसमें आपको उधर वाली पेंटिंग्स में कुछ एनिमल्स की पूरी चेन दिखेगी। एनिमल्स में आपको सर्वाधिक हिरन है, और इन्हें की जो डेकोरेशन है वो चालकोलिथिक फेज में जो डेकोरेशन की जाती थी उस तरह से। फिर इसके बाद इधर वाली पेंटिंग्स में ऐसा लगता है कि किसी महिला को बैठाया गया, उसके साथ साथ 2 चिल्ड्रन उसके बच्चे बैठे हैं। वो बच्चे यहाँ पर कुछ चाहे वार्तालाप कर रहे चाहे बात कर रहे हैं, किसी चीज़ को उन्होंने बताने का प्रयास किया है। यही मेरा एक कोई मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट ये है कि अशोकनगर जिले में एक यही साइट नहीं है। मैं जब सर्वे किया तो बहुत सारी साइट्स मिली, चूंकि मैं सरफेस से कलेक्ट किया तो सरफेस का मटेरियल हम लोग डेटिंग नहीं कर सकते। यहाँ पर मुझे एक जो ट्रेंच मिली, उस ट्रेंच से जब मैंने लिया लगभग 2.5 फीट का या 3 फीट का डिपॉजिट मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट माना जाता है अगर अपनी हिस्ट्री में इतना मोटा डिपॉजिट मिलता है तो, इसलिए मैंने इस पेपर को लिया। धन्यवाद।
आंध्र प्रदेश blessed with vast natural resources, high mountain ranges, perennial and semi-perennial rivers, dense forests, a wide variety of flora and fauna, provided colonial habitat for man since prehistoric times. The southern coastal Andhra between the Gundlakamma river and Sonamukhi river up to the Kalangi rivers in the early historic period, and it was populated in the narrow plateau region 15 to 30 kilometers off the coast and in the upland regions. The settlements primarily concentrated on the riverlets. Important settlements were located on the coastal route connecting the Krishna Valley and the Kanchipuram region. Among them, Kottapatnam is an important megalithic site in this region, the main study area. So, Kottapatnam site, now a small village in Kota Tehsil of the Nellore district in the Swarnamukhi River Valley area, and just about 500 meters away from the sea coast of Bay of Bengal. Must have been an active port of call for the vessels coming from both western and eastern countries. In the recent past, Kottapatnam in the Nellore district, just beside the Swarnamukhi River basin, was excavated, and some information about the results of this excavation is available for us. The Directorate of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Andhra Pradesh, was reportedly discovery of Kottapatnam site, which is located in the district of Nellore, with the importance of early historical period. So, Kottapatnam in ancient literature. Thus, from the above discussion, it is evident that Kottapatnam was an important port of call for the ships coming from eastern as well as western of far-off lands. Probably, this place finds mention in ancient literature. Ptolemy mentions Kottis among the places on the eastern coast. Kottis has earlier been identified with Alluru Kottapatnam in Prakasam district, but not in Nellore district. So, according to Ptolemy. But now, in view of the recent discovery, the identification may have to be reconsidered. In all probability, Kottapatnam under discussion, it is the place mentioned by Ptolemy. Antiquity and administrative history of Lower Swarnamukhi. The Lower Swarnamukhi area, which is falling under the Nellore region, was called as Mundanadu and Mundarashtra, and from the 10th century AD. The name Pakanadu came into usage, revealing the political and administrative changes that came with the emergence of Telugu Chodas. While it is now recognized that Tondai Nadu, not the most parts more or less, does not extend beyond the Arni and the Swarnamukhi rivers. The Mundarashtra or Mundanadu forms the heartland of the Nellore region. So known from the 5th century AD, the Mundanadu comprises of the present-day taluks of Nellore and Venkatagiri taluks of Nellore district. The Pakanadu, the larger region, corresponds to the correspond to the coastal tracts between the river Gundakama, the north, the Lake Pulicat and the rivers of Sonamukhi and Pralaya Kaveri in the south, and on the west by the Veligonda ranges of the eastern Ghats extending to the Kadapa and Rajampeta taluks of Kadapa district. The Nellore region was under the rule of the Satavahanas, Pallavas, eastern Chalukyas, Chodas, Telugu Chodas and Kakatiyas during the period. Settlement pattern in this area. Here, traces of ancient habitation could be noticed for a stretch of more than 1 kilometer. Throughout this area, proposed quantities of foreign pottery were noticed. Probably no other site in the South India has yielded so much foreign ware as noticed in Kottapatnam. Numerous dates, both of Roman and Chinese origin, could be picked up from the surface itself. Apart from this, the other important evidence is the artificial channel which was dug probably for betting of the ships. The site with the cultural debris is just about 500 meters away from the sea coast. Though the foreign wares indicate that this place was receiving vessels from far off lands, there is no river or rivulet joining the sea at this place, which would have facilitated inland berthing for the ships coming here. There is only an irregular creek which must have been used initially for berthing the vessels, but probably with a view to catering to the increasing number of vessels coming here, an artificial channel was dug which extends to about 1.25 kilometers in length and about 200 meters in width. The occurrence of foreign wares all along the eastern bank of this channel is an indication that the cargo was loaded and unloaded along this channel. So, contacts with the foreign. So, what are the contacts with the Roman?
2 minutes.
So, here, contacts with Mediterranean region, it is. So, in general point of view, the pottery, so Roman glass pieces, Roman rollated ware, what are the things are found in Kottapatnam. Similarly, these pottery wares, what are the states are related, find out from Arikmedu. The comparison with these two places. So, what are the relations? So, how they did? Actually, earlier references always used to tell Arikmedu is the main place in south. So, this is the most important. Which place has very good contacts with the foreign, but after when Professor K.P. Rao, so director at that time, so in 1984 he excavated it. In his excavation, he found out that there is Roman trade in India, in South India, from all these potteries exported from coming from Arikmedu to the Kottapatnam. But the first term by the Professor K.P. Rao declared that these potteries are exporting from Kottapatnam to Arikmedu, not from Arikmedu to Kottapatnam. This is a newly trending thought in South Indian related issues. And Chinese contacts. There is none of this side. None of this. We don't have. We used to tell from starting onwards. We don't have Chinese contacts. So each and every time we used to tell Mediterranean. So, but for the first time, that too, the stamped pottery is very common in China. So, as well as stamped pottery also is found out in from this side. So, and as well as so Kaolin pottery only from Kottapatnam side only at this step, indicating this river valley zone. Only there is a number of sites. There is a number of Jugurajapatnam, and number of sites are there, but only Kottapatnam has very good contacts. And in his Professor K.P. Rao's excavation, so he find out one coin, still not yet dated. So it is related to the Chinese, and clearly it has each and everything in that letters it showing. So we find out that. In my conclusion, a very important ancient port with the habitational vestige was noticed at Kottapatnam. The discovery is very significant as the site goes back at least to the 3rd century BC and reveals foreign trade contacts in the form of Roman rollated ware, Roman glass pieces, Chinese stamped glazed and kaolin pottery. The site is very extensive, covering an area of about 1.5 km half of the and just 500 meters away from the Bay of Bengal. The significance of the site lies in the fact that here for the first time we have archaeological evidence showing South India's early contacts with China. The site has yielded a broken stone cell also found out. It's suggesting Neolithic vestiges also there. There's continuation process from Neolithic to the up to the early history. So the density of the settlement and the presence of foreign goods at some of the sites in the area suggests that some of the locations were trading centers of early historical times. So from the retrospect, the author may conclude that Kotapatnam was an important seaport in ancient times and it received ships from the Mediterranean as well as Chinese region. The discovery of this site proves conclusively South India's contact with China even during the pre-Christian era. So, last but not the least, the archaeological sites and monuments in Nellore district show great variety and uniqueness which calls for all those study. Day by day, the number of these monuments is dwindling, and it is high time that the institutions engaged in archaeological work take up excavations and systematic study of these monuments before they completely disappear from the scene. So, this is
I just have one thing to say, because KP Rao has published this Kotapatnam site
Yes.
in Noburu Karashima and this Daisho Foundation book.
Yes.
So, and in a recent seminar I was with him, and he also presented on Kotapatnam and the kaolin and others. So what new you are suggesting apart from his own things?
Actually, in my exploration, actually this topic is related to my PhD. So
You work with him?
Yes,
Do you work with KP Rao?
yes, ma'am. He is my PC supervisor. So I took my so I'm from same place. So up to now there is no work is went on particularly in Lower Sonamukhi. So every time megalithic. So we have when I visited, and of course KP Rao are one of the trip.
So you are taking his work forward.
As for what I want to show so not only China. So what about the rest of the East? I want to I collected some of the photos and sorry I am unable to show this. Sorry, I am not here. So when I collected, there is in my not in my opinion, the thing showing there not only the Roman and China. We have a very good contacts with the Eastern.
Thailand, I suppose, Thai ceramics.
Yeah, there is so many foreign elements in there. Foreign elements of foreign pottery I collected. So I want to do further. So we are simply every time also most focus on megalithic and Chittur. So I want to do in my future. I dedicated to the Nellore.
Okay.
So I want to explore from megalithic
Best
to
wishes.
early history. That is my idea.
Any questions?
So I have one curiosity. Are you using the word Roman in single quote marks?
Yeah.
So Roman trade. So we have a number of Roman related.
No. My question is, are you using the word Roman
Yes, sir.
in single quote marks, because the current thinking is that what has passed off as Roman is not necessarily Roman.
And with this Indo-Roman trade is a misnomer.
It is a misnomer.
It is trade with the Eastern Roman Empire, so many other things like the things which were formerly thought to be all this amphoras. Now we know that these are most of them are torpedo jars, locals and torpedo jars. So you have to be very critical and look at the things.
Nice session. Thank you.
And sir, this is a very valid
Thank you, sir.
point
Thank
that
you.
sir
Thank you.
raised.
I
Just
don't
don't blankly say Roman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Eastern Mediterranean leader.